Today we have the Oris Aquis Caliber 400 and my Omega Seamaster 300 meters. The question is, who takes the crown? Welcome back to yet another versus video on the Chisholm Hunter channel. My name is Harrison, and am I biased? Yes, a little bit. I do own an Omega Seamaster 300 meters, but today I'm going to be trying to take a subjective view. But before we begin, we actually have a very special giveaway. We have 5 high quality Breguet hats, and if you look in the back of the Breguet hat, it actually has like an embossed bee on the metal there. They're really good caps. I've actually got one at home. So all you need to do to be in the chance of winning one of these 5 hats is subscribe to the channel if you haven't already and comment with your favorite Breguet model. And I'll fight you in the comments over which one you pick. Anyways, let's get back to the video at hand. Let's start with the specs. The Oris comes in at 40 millimeters in diameter, the one that I have on me at the moment, but the other variation comes in at 43.5 millimeters in diameter. So you have the choice to pick between the two. The Omega comes in at 42 millimeters in diameter, but it only comes in 42 millimeters in diameter. So you don't have the flexibility of choice. However, when it comes to diving watches, my preference is 41 to 42 millimeters. I think that 40 is a little bit too small for a diving watch, but 43.5 is a little bit too big for a diving watch. So I would lean towards the Omega here. Let's move on to the thickness. And I think the thickness is in part why the Oris wears that much bigger. It's a thick watch, but I'll tell you the thickness in a second. So the Oris comes in at 13.8, probably touching 14 actually, millimeters in thickness. But let's take a look at the Omega. The Omega that I have in my left hand, I just took it off the wrist, comes in at 13.1 millimeters in thickness. So I know that a millimeter seems like it's not a lot, but when it's sitting off the wrist, it is a lot. How do I feel about the thickness? Well, in my watch collection, I tend to stick with slimmer watches. I just have a personal preference for slimmer watches, and part of the reason is that I have a very outdoorsy lifestyle, and I think that things that sit closer to the wrist are less likely to get damaged. So I would have to side with the Omega here. The Lug To Lug on the Omega Seamaster 300 meters comes in at 50 millimeters, maybe just below 50 millimeters, maybe 49.5 based on our digital calipers, whereas the Oris Aquis comes in at 46 or maybe 47.5. So there is a substantial difference there, and actually I prefer watches with a smaller lug to lug distance. However, then you get to the lug width. The Oris's lugs are a lot thicker, a lot more substantial, whereas the Omegas taper off quite quickly and are a little bit longer, a little bit more elegant. I do prefer the Omega's lugs. I prefer that slimmer feel. However, I do prefer the Oris's Lug To Lug. I think it's a lot more comfortable. Both these models come in stainless steel, so there's not really a comparison there. I do like stainless steel, but where there is a comparison is on the bracelet. Now, obviously my Omega at the moment doesn't have the bracelet, it has the rubber strap, and the Oris can also be chosen with a rubber strap. I prefer the Oris's bracelet to the Omega's bracelet, but I prefer the Omega's rubber strap to the Oris's rubber strap. Just personal preference. On the Oris's rubber strap, I'm just not a fan of how they've put Oris down the rubber strap. I mean, I know it's an Oris watch. I would prefer just something more neutral. Whereas on the Omega's bracelet, I'm just not into that 3-link, 4-link feel. I just prefer the combination of brushed and polished steel on the Oris. Comparison to the Omega, where you have mostly brushed and 2 or 4 thin lines of polished. I just prefer the style on the Oris. I think that it shines a lot brighter and brings out the dial. It pops out that dial a little bit more. However, when you think of functionality, you think it's a diving watch, then brushed makes more sense because brush doesn't scratch or show scratches as easily as polished. So it's a difficult one. Let's jump straight back into that case and let's talk about the crown. Let's talk about the crown guards and the Helium escape valve. So obviously the Omega has that Helium escape valve, and I've heard mixed reviews about this. Some people love it, some people really don't like it. If you don't like it, then the Oris is the one, but the thing is, I'm wearing it. So I do like it. And then we get to the crown. The Oris has a more angular sort of crown guards defending that crown, and the crown is actually a little more short and stubby than the Omega's crown and a little more chunky. It's easier to turn. I actually do prefer the Oris crown here. The Omega crown guards kind of slope up quite quickly, and then the crown sits comfortably in between, but it's not as comfortable to turn. And the teeth on the crown on the Oris are that little bit more prominent. It's a tiny little detail, but the Oris has this one. Let's talk about colors for a second. Obviously, I went with the white dial Omega, but you have different colors to choose from. You have blue, you have black, and then there's different metal variations as well to choose from. In the Oris, you have the green dial, you have the black dial, but when it comes to metal variations, there's not as much. There's not as much to pick from. So if it's gold you're after, or maybe some different metals, maybe Omega's where to go. When I am picking a watch, I tend to pick neutral colors. That is just my personal preference because I feel it goes with more. You might have noticed that I'm in casual attire today. It's the weekend, that's why I'm in casual attire, but I feel that because this Omega is white, it goes, and it wouldn't go if it was maybe a different color. And it also goes with gold and silver. I've actually got my silver Chisholm Hunter bracelet and Chisholm Hunter chain on at the moment. A question I get a lot is, do Chisholm Hunter only sell watches? And the answer is no. They're actually a diamond merchant through and through, and they have gents jewelry. So if you want to shop that, I'll link it below for you. Let's look at the bezels of each of these models and then go into the dials and then go into the movement. By the way, for the price, the movement of the Oris is absolutely incredible. The bezel on the Omega is that little bit thicker, and I think that's what makes the case look that little bit smaller. So the text is that little bit bigger due to this thickness, but then we get to the teeth. And the Omega doesn't really have teeth. It has kind of a textured inlay, and it's still quite easy to move when you have no gloves on or no wetsuit. But let's think of what these watches are designed for. They're designed for diving. So then you look at the Oris and it has those prominent teeth, and that would make it easier to move for the divers. So from a functionality standpoint, the Oris wins here. Before we move on to that dial, I want you to take a moment and think of what you'll be using this watch for. If it's functionality, the bezel on the Oris kind of makes sense. If it's style, the bezel on the Omega kind of makes sense. And this is a common theme throughout this versus video. Some of the features on each of these watches, they lean more into functionality or they lean more into the style. So just keep that in mind. Let's move on to the dials on these watches, and we're not going to compare the colors because there's just so many variations, and obviously I've got the white and the Oris is the blue, but both dials have a date window at 6 o'clock. Well done to both of them because I prefer 6 o'clock date windows. I just think it adds that little bit more symmetry. The Oris's dial has a sun ray pattern running through it, and it also has a gradient going from darker to lighter when you get towards the center. I really like this, and for the price point, you're getting a lot for your money. But then you look at the Omega, and it has that iconic wave motif running through it. I love this depth, but then you need to consider the price, and when it gets to that level of quality and craftsmanship, you're paying the price. Now that is a very good segue onto the price, of course, but I'm going to save that. I'm going to save that till the end because I want to get across how brilliant both these watches are before we go on to the price. Both these dials, or both these watches, have sapphire crystal glass and water resistant to 300 meters, which is pretty impressive. Will I ever go that deep? No, but you know, you can do it if you want. At the 12 o'clock mark on the Oris on the dial, the Oris logo stands alone. It stands proud, it is clean. And then you get to the Omega and it has the Omega symbol, the Omega logo, Seamaster, and the word professional. It's not a bad thing, it's just personal preference. If you prefer a cleaner dial that maybe doesn't distract as much from the time, maybe Oris is the one. The hands on the Omega dial are skeletonized, and the reason I personally like skeletonized hands is because you can see through to the dial. So although the skeletonized hands are covering the Omega logo at the moment, I can still see through to the Omega logo. It's that personal preference. The Oris doesn't have skeletonized hands, but skeletonized hands are a love or hate. Some people love them, some people really, really don't. So if you don't like the skeletonized hands, then Oris has the alternative. The hour markers on the Omega are a combination of circles and rectangles. And a little detail that I like is where the date window is, there's still the remnants of a little rectangle, which makes that symmetrical, feel more symmetrical. And then we get to the Oris, and it has all the same kind of rectangles facing inwards that taper off. And this is an interesting one. When it comes to those little details, like you can see in the Omega, for example, the splash of red on that hand, the difference between the circular and rectangular hour markers, the red Seamaster logo, it's quite a lot. And it takes a lot of time to do these little details. On the Oris, you don't have those little details. And it's kind of due to the price. I mean, they've spent a long time in the Oris, but they've spent longer on the Omega, and it's not devaluing the Oris. Some people like simplicity, and if you want simplicity, the Oris is for you. But enough of my ramble, let's take a look at the loom of both of these watches. Both are fully functional divers, so the loom on both is pretty incredible. As you can see here, there is a dot of loom on the bezel, and the hands all have loom, as well as the hour markers. The loom is a beautiful blue color. As you can see, this is the Omega's loom, and it's that little bit brighter than the Oris's. It also has a combination of green and blue loom, and it also have that little green speck. For me, the Omega wins here. So of course I prefer the Omega I have on my wrist, but the thing is, a lot of people don't like the skeletonized hands with that loom. A lot of people think that it's a little bit distracting. So if you think it's a little bit distracting, then the Oris is there. And then when you think of the functionality of what these watches are used for, why would you need skeletonized hands? Before we move on to the movement, let's talk about Chisholm Hunter for a second. Chisholm Hunter are actually authorized retailers for both of these watches, Omega and Oris. So if you want to shop either of them, make sure you click the link below. The movement in the Oris Aquis is Oris's very own Caliber 400. It has a power reserve of 120 hours. It beats at a frequency of 28,800 VPH and has 21 joules. This movement, for the price, is mental. 120 hours of power, but what's more than all of those little details is the 10-year guarantee. 10 years. I would be 34 by the time the guarantee runs out. That is crazy. As well as this, the Oris has an open case back so that you can see in to that beautiful movement, which I'm a huge fan of. I would actually actively avoid watches that you can't see the movement of. It's just a personal preference. I mean, it's like buying a Ferrari with a V8 engine, but locking the bonnet shut and you can't see the engine. This doesn't make sense to me. The movement on the Omega is the Caliber 8800. It's a self-winding movement with a coaxial escapement. It's certified by Master Chronometer, approved by Metas, and has resistance to magnetic fields reaching 15,000 Gauss. But it only has 55 hours of power, and also, I say only a 5-year guarantee. That's still pretty incredible. Think of it in like a car's terms. They would never give you that kind of guarantee, but it only has a 5-year guarantee, and the Oris has a 10-year guarantee. So Oris, well done. The price for the Oris comes in at £2,700, whereas the price for the Omega comes in at £4,550. That is with the rubber strap. So there's obviously a big difference in price here. There's over £2,000 between each of these watches, and each of them are incredible. I mean, for the money, you're getting 120 hours of power and a 10-year guarantee with that Oris, not to mention all the brilliant functionality it has. But I'm wearing an Omega, and I love the brand. I picked Omega. With that said, if you were looking for your very first diver, you cannot beat Oris. I mean, that movement, that functionality, it's brilliant. And then you get to the price point, which is even better. Before you go, I would love to know what you would pick. Would you go with Oris, or would you go with Omega? Thank you very much for watching this versus video at Chisholm Hunter. My name is Harrison, as always, and remember, you can get one of these. There is 5 going. All you need to do is hit this subscribe button and comment with your favorite Breguet model. I'm gonna go get some lunch and decide who's getting these Breguet hats. See you later.